Hey y'all, I'm Dan Hamilton, host of the Next Gen Warrior Show. As always, the Next Gen Warrior Show is brought to you by Chairman George P. Bush and the Texas Veterans Land Board. To check out the resources and benefits provided by the VLB, type in your browser vlb.texas.gov and you'll be able to find all of the information there. Today, I have the honor of being joined by Jennifer Pilcher. She is the CEO of Patriot Boot Camp, and she's joining us all the way from Annapolis, Maryland. Jennifer, thank you for working through some vacation time of myself and some weather. I appreciate you being on the program with us today and making it work. Can you tell us about what Patriot Boot Camp does and who it serves?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me on here. And while we are stationed here in Annapolis, Maryland, I have a fun fact about Texas. My son was born out there in Fort Worth when we were stationed at Joint Reserve Base, Fort Worth. So I have a sweet spot in my heart for Texas. So thank you so much for inviting me here today. Patriot Boot Camp is a 501c3 nonprofit. It was started back in 2012 by our founder, Taylor McLemore, and he was actually enrolled in part of Techstars accelerator program for his own company. And Techstars provides 3-month intensive entrepreneurship accelerators. And their motto is give first. And so Taylor really wanted to give back to the military veteran community. And he founded this organization on a 3-day boot camp. So we provide intensive 3-day boot camp entrepreneur programs that's mentorship driven. So we have entrepreneurs from around who are veteran, male spouses, and active duty, like you mentioned. And we, prior to COVID, would bring them together somewhere in the nation for 3 days of speakers, mentors, pitch contest, and a lot of networking and connection.
So we had a conversation before we came on air here about some of the statistics that veterans see about the reduced number of veterans going into entrepreneurship after the military compared to the World War II generation. What do you think the state of military and veteran entrepreneurship is?
Yeah, I've actually heard that stat floating around a lot in our community, and I found it surprising because our program, we currently have 1,000 alumni in our program. We are an application-based program. And to give you an example, our previous program in San Francisco, we had 431 veteran male spouse entrepreneurs apply for 50 spots. So the demand and the need is extensive. And then we even took it a step further and segmented those 431 entrepreneurs into the ideation stage, the pre-revenue, and the revenue. And it was almost split down, a third, and a third. So these aren't just, entrepreneurs who have an idea. A lot of them already have established businesses, and they need that next step of mentorship and connection to further along their business. So honestly, we can't keep up with the demand at Patriot Boot Camp for entrepreneurship.
What began your focus on entrepreneurship?
Yeah, mine's a little, crazy from the outside, but when you start to live in this entrepreneur world, it's almost sometimes like an underground mafia. But maybe it's because I'm from New Jersey that I reference mafia.
There's a whole lot of guys and gals walking around in trench coats trying to make deals and build businesses, huh?
Exactly. A lot of them, carry their guns, so it's very similar.
That's right. Hey, there you go.
So I grew up in New Jersey, born and raised, non-military family. My grandfather served, but pretty traditional household. And then I met my now husband when he was at the Naval Academy and I was in college. And he, told me he only had 7 years to, give back to the Navy and then we'd live a normal life. Well, we're now on year 24 of the Navy. So never trust a Navy
those
guy.
Things can change over time, huh?
That's right. What branch of service are you?
I'm Marine Corps veteran.
See?
I did 5 years enlisted from the Houston area. And after that, I was kind of like, you know what? I think I'm going to put this on hold.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a crazy life, but fortunately for us, every set of orders are like, okay, this sounds good. And then you blink and you're at 24 years. So my career was a speech language pathologist. I have my graduate degree, love my career. We worked wherever we lived. However, quickly it started getting cumbersome and expensive because I need state licensure for every state we move to. So in the first 6 years of being married to the military, we moved to 4 different states. So that becomes a challenge. And in year 2012, I finally decided, let me start something that I can move with me. I think I always had a bit of the entrepreneurial spirit. And I also saw a huge need in the military community of not having an all-in-one resource website for um, military families and veterans for things like moving and deployment and education. So I started my own business, militaryonclick.com, and fortunately worked virtual before virtual was cool, or forced, whichever way people are looking at it. And I really did that to help bring in income in our family. I also did it so I could be hopefully at the bus stop with the kids, and it took off, became a beyond full-time job, but loved it. It's for military spouses, you and I talked about, sometimes I think there's a different motivation or need from military spouse entrepreneurs versus veteran entrepreneurs. But fortunately for me, Patriot Boot Camp was launched in 2012. I got accepted to the program in 2013. So I'm an alumni of Patriot Boot Camp, and for years stay involved then as the mentor and speaker. And then last year in January, they asked me to throw my hat in the ring for the CEO position, which I'm honored to serve as.
Well, before we go any farther, I want to thank you as well as your husband for your 24 years of service to the country. It's really pretty incredible to be able to sit down with leaders like yourself who have not only are leading companies and leading veterans and trying to build a veterans community, but have also spent such a vast majority of their life dedicated to the military. So thank you for that.
Wow.
I want to push down a little bit more into the mil spouse aspect. On the Next Gen Warrior Show, we have predominantly focused on the veteran experience after the military, and we have maybe not had the opportunity to speak about the military spouse aspect, as the personal and the professional side of things. So can you tell us maybe what military spouses are looking for professionally? Because they have to change duty stations every 2 to 4 years. So if I go to work for a Dell or an Amazon and they say, well, this person is going to be leaving in 2 or 3 years, it makes it very difficult for them to maintain steady employment for 5, 10, or 15 years. Talk about that challenge a little bit and what maybe some of the solutions that are being provided to military spouses are.
Sure. Well, thank you for bringing it up. It's truly due to awareness like your programs that helps us get the word out, because military spouse unemployment still hovers around 23 to 25% above the national unemployment average. And COVID has only complicated that and made it worse. And I think there has been a huge amount of work done from a lot of my personal friends, military spouses, through programs to help increase awareness, and large companies actually like Amazon, USAA, many others that have stepped up and said, we are going to commit to hiring military spouses and keep them through their PCS process. So for example, if you're working for Amazon in Seattle, you're stationed out there, they're going to help you find a position for the next place you're stationed, which is tremendous. And this is when I start to feel old, because that was never the case, even really 10 years ago. So on the corporate side and for military spouses for employment, I would say that we've done great strides, but there's still a lot more work to be done. There's also a huge initiative that was passed a few years ago for military spouse licensing to have reciprocity now through different states. So now, as a speech therapist, I could start working in a state immediately and bring in income, and then be on a provisional license to then have my license approved. So, and I think now it's almost all 50 states do have the military spouse licensing act enabled. So that's huge. On the entrepreneurship side, it's exploded. Military spouse entrepreneurship, I have to say, is still the stealth bomber, if we want to use military references, in the entrepreneurship community. Obviously, the majority are women, but we have male military spouses and entrepreneurs. But they are rising faster than any other demographic of entrepreneurs. They have an incredible success rate. A good example you asked about is a PBC alumni, Erica McManus, and her co-founder, Liza Rodewald. They have a company called Instant Teams. And same, it was born out of the frustration of moving from state to state and trying to find employment, the difficulty and the hurdles of state to state taxes. All of those things play into it when you try to get employment. So they started a company where they solely focus on remote virtual employment for military spouses. They just landed their first Series A. So as far as we know, they could be the first military spouses in the country who have landed VC funding for their company. They're now over 50 employees just for their company, but through their company have now hired and provided remote careers, not just jobs, careers for military spouses. So we're proud of them as PBC alumni, but just also military spouses who are leading the way. But, you know, it's hard. We get on these programs and we kind of highlight and make it sound wonderful, but it's still hard work. It's for sure the hardest thing I've ever done. You know, it is complicated by the fact of deployments and PCS, although every successful military spouse and veteran entrepreneur we know uses that actually as an advantage versus, you know, some sort of obstacle, which I love. So it's pretty amazing community to be involved in.
Can I ask you the difference in skill set, or if there is a difference between you as an entrepreneur versus you as a CEO?
Great question. So I think for me, the biggest thing that now I'm realizing is my first company was my first at bat. And I learned so much through starting that company in 2012, leading it through till 2015. I was acquired in 2015, and I stayed with the company actually as the CEO through 2017. And I think maybe it was you had asked me if, you know, COVID was the biggest challenge that I faced so far as a leader. And I was like, actually, it wasn't, because I feel like I got a lot of hard stuff out of the way the first time. So I think as an entrepreneur, especially as a first-time entrepreneur, you're always walking on landmines. Nothing prepares you for it. Whether you have an MBA or just street smarts and bootstrap, there's just nothing like learning on the spot. Whereas now as a CEO, I feel fortunate that I have that experience to apply it to this organization. I have a huge network to apply it. I think if I ever started a company again, I know more what I'm going into versus being completely shocked the first time around and knocked off my, you know, knocked on my keister quite a few times. I said, sometimes you feel like your teeth get punched and land on the other side of the room. So the nice part about seeing CEO versus entrepreneur is there's a different mindset. When you own a company, it's 24/7. It's always on your mind. It's always what you work on in around. CEO, I also walked into a situation where I had the best COO in the world at Patriot Boot Camp, but then I rehired my two best people from my former company. So, you know, you surround yourself by good people, you trust in them, and then I am able to sleep at night. I am able to go on a vacation and know that things are being taken care of. So I think there's a little bit of a mindset switch from entrepreneur, founder, you know, versus CEO. I'm enjoying this a lot.
Well, to switch gears on you, I heard some barking in the background, and I know here at Next Gen Warrior we have a lot of canine fans, so it's good to hear another one support the show. Obviously, very excited about what you were discussing there. I'm also interested to know too, how has PBC changed during COVID? What was your experience trying to, you know, I guess within any business, but especially with entrepreneurship, being in the room, talking to people, trying to sell not only your business, but yourself, obviously having that taken away must have been like, oh, we have to change our business model. You almost had to go from the CEO hat almost back to the entrepreneurship hat, right? And really make adjustments as you were going through that process. Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So actually, one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make as an entrepreneur or CEO was we had our San Francisco in-person program scheduled for March. And literally COVID hit San Francisco 3 days before we were supposed to go out there with 150 people. So our 3-day programs consist of 50 selected entrepreneurs, about 50 mentors who volunteer and travel from across the country to come speak and mentor our speakers. And San Francisco had declared a state of emergency. I'm responsible for 150 people flying from around the country. And it's like, oh my gosh, what do we do? And it's people first, always. Whatever business you're in, whether it's technology or service-based, your people are the most important part of it. So we did end up canceling 48 hours before we were supposed to have the in-person program. We undid a 6-month planning process within 2 days. And then we had to take a deep breath and do what you're just saying is like, okay, for 7 years, this organization has only done in-person programs. It's our only line of revenue, sponsorship. And now, like you said, how do I call up a company and say, hey, do you want to sponsor an in-person program in the middle of a worldwide pandemic? It doesn't really go over too well. So we had to put our heads together. We immediately pivoted. I mean, within a week, we had come up with our new live Lunch and Learn series. So every Thursday, everyone is welcome to join us. So we hope your audience will join. It's right around lunchtime on the East Coast, so 12 to 1 o'clock. We bring in those speakers that normally travel across the nation to be with us. World-class speakers, entrepreneurs. So once a week, we started that. We've now had about 20 of those. We then piloted a virtual Patriot mentor program where we took our San Francisco entrepreneurs and matched them up virtually with their mentors. So we had about 30 hours of mentoring sessions virtually that went really well, just like this. And then we piloted our first ever PBC Activate program. So for that whole group of ideation that did not get accepted into San Francisco, we had an opportunity to reach them. And through a good friend of our program, Will Gregory, he had a 6-week virtual curriculum-based program that happened once a week. And we had about 20 entrepreneurs go through that program. So it is not the same as in person, for sure. And we're trying to get in the mindset of not planning, a replacement is different. So we're currently planning our virtual program for the fall, and it will be just like this through, Zoom and our technology, but it will be different. It'll be interactive. It will not be death by slide presentation. And she came to visit us.
Oh, hey, there she is, huh? She's back, huh?
She is back. In fact, I'm going to ask her
to join the show.
Yeah, Zoe wants to join the show. Katie, can you? This is real life. Everyone's seeing.
I know. I love it. This is it. This is 2020 right here in a nutshell.
Exactly. Live Zoom recording with somebody in Texas and trying to get my son now to take the dog out of the room. Thank you, Griffin.
Well, Zoe's welcome here anytime. Just so she knows when you go back and talk with her,
Yep. And this is what's happening across the country, right? Last year or 6 months ago, it would have been like dying in embarrassment that my dog and my kid walked in on us. But It's the way it
That's
goes.
just the state of affairs. I know.
Yes.
I'm interested to know too, and this is almost pure speculation, right? Is have are the businesses that you think will emerge from this, do you think they will be focused on virtual meetings, or do you think the desire to meet in person again will be more dominant? Like I think some people, I typically divide it between introvert and extrovert. If you're an
Mm.
introvert, maybe you stay home and you kind of thrive in the internal atmosphere of being in your house, not having to travel, not being around people as much. But if you're an extrovert, are they the ones that are going to be starting these businesses where people need to get together? Do you think it skews one way or the other?
Hmm. So we are looking at this heavily, and trying to find the trends and just literally asking everyone we know. I do think you are right about introvert versus extrovert, but I do think there's a little bit of caution in there to our introverted friends that entrepreneurship, you have to get out one way or another. I heard you mention earlier about still meeting up with people when you can safely. Is you have to do it. What I see the trend, and we're planning for this, is probably more localized, smaller programs. So our whole model was recruiting from around the nation, and people flying in from everywhere to converge on one place. And if I was to bet, I think we're going to, when it's safe, is start hyper localizing. So if we were planning something down in Texas by you guys, we can recruit heavily from that area. And so people can stay at their own home at night, feel safer with that, a short drive. And then there's an advantage. You're meeting an ecosystem of veteran or mil-spouse entrepreneurs in your area. So we're trying to take everything that's like a bummer and turn around and be like, you know what, this is actually could work out. And sponsors, I should share that they've been incredible supporters. Our sponsors, USAA, Google for Startups, MetLife, Jared Polis Foundation, Techstars, and I mention them specifically because they all said, do what you need to do. Keep Patriot Bootcamp alive, keep it going, and we'll support you. And they're all leaning towards more meaningful, deeper impact meetings. So I think when we come out of this, my guess is it will start to get back to in-person, but I think it will be more hyper area with those people who can avoid the airline travel if they don't feel comfortable. And then, a hybrid model where they might be able to tune in from, their home if they're not comfortable traveling. But yeah, we're trying to think through all of those scenarios, and you know what? It forces you to do something different, and isn't that what entrepreneurship is all about?
Yeah, well, in the event that things are a little bit safer and a little more convenient here in the next 6 to 12 months, we'd love to have Patriot Bootcamp down here in Central Texas. There's an incredible amount of talent here and people really ambitious, veterans as well as service members. And I'm interested to know also, when I look out at some of the macro companies in America, when you talk about the Googles, the Facebooks, the Amazons, as well as some of the other larger tech companies, it seems like tech has begun, at least again on a macro scale, to really dominate over a lot of other different industries.
Mm-hmm.
Are the businesses that you're seeing are they primarily tech companies, or are people still wanting to start a lumber business or an oil and gas company or a transportation company? Is there interest outside of our focus on tech?
So I should have mentioned earlier, Patriot Bootcamp actually focuses more on tech. So
Okay.
we're a little skewed. So it doesn't mean you have to be the developer of the next best technology, but the company itself has some sort of technology to it that's scalable. So we do see a lot of technology-based companies anyway, but I would say for sure it is exploded. And I think we are on a path for that to continue. What I will say, though, is the amount of companies with social impact has really grown, that most of the companies we see, and I see in general, have, some sort of social mission. I'm invited on a podcast in about a week for agriculture in technology. And it reminds me of a company we have, one of our PVC founders, he has a traditional drone company that was to help farms identify the pesticides and insecticides that are killing farms. So there's a social impact. Well, through his technology, he realized that the best solution for these farmers were to actually combat it, not with chemicals, but with other insects that kills the bad insects. So now the drones take the insects up and releases the insects. So our companies are amazing. They blow me away all the time with the technology. But I have to say, with every single one I'm thinking of right now has some sort of impact on our society. And that to me is incredible, that veterans such as yourself, I feel like in your position right now, always, it's just in you, that mission to serve, and they continue that in the companies that they build. So I just think technology with social impact is the biggest growth segment we're seeing.
Yeah, and I guess to counter what I was saying earlier, tech has become this ubiquitous way of life that, like you just said, it may be agriculture, it might be farming, it might be transportation, it might be a steel company, but almost every company is now becoming in some way a tech company. So to be in that space, you do actually get an opportunity to understand different segments of the American economy or your community. And maybe that's one of the greatest things about tech, is that it doesn't really pigeonhole you to just one industry. You can apply the tech to every industry across the United States.
Yeah, there's some where I have to have somebody decipher for me what it is. But yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. Now back to what you're saying though, traditional product based or, brick based businesses, I think they're still there, but they're struggling. I mean, this is not all roses. We have had many PVC alumni reach out that they have had to close their doors, but I can tell you with every single email we got, they said, I'm starting something new. I mean, think of that. Like most people I think would retreat and go home. And I think there's definitely a grieving period, but one I know has already launched his new business. So, I think the resiliency is there, but there's a huge need. We need our support from all Americans on our veteran and mil-spouse owned businesses. And I think you'll see that kind of back to the World War II thing. One study I bet they didn't do back then, and that's prominent now, is veterans hire veterans. And that's proven. The SBA has all the statistics on that. It's probably not, it's a little bit more anecdotal right now, but military spouses hire military spouses and veterans. So while maybe percentage rate isn't the highest or the fastest growth as World War II times, I think in employment, we're outnumbering that. And there's also studies have proven that veteran-owned businesses last longer than civilian-based companies. And in a time like this, there's no doubt. I mean, as you know, as a veteran, you have to make it work. You have no option as a military service member. There is no excuse. So I think that's going to help these businesses during COVID and beyond to really step up to the plate.
What would your message be to a veteran who has been maybe sitting on an idea, or somebody in the armed forces who is sitting on an idea, to get them to make the idea become a reality?
First and foremost, no one's going to steal it. Everyone's reaction is if I tell somebody, they're going to steal it. And I had the same issue. I can tell you right now that it's all in execution. Probably your idea, somebody probably also has it, but it's all in execution. The only way you're going to be able to get that idea going is to join and be part of a community like Patriot Boot Camp. We're also good friends with Bunker Labs, IVMF, Dog Tag Bakery. All of us behind the scenes all connect. These are all veteran and military spouse entrepreneurship programs in the country. And we want you to engage in all of them. We all offer something different. So you need to reach out. You need to join our live lunch and learns. You need to get involved in our, just sign up for our newsletter website, but you have to get connected to this community. It is a family. It also, I think for a lot of veterans and male spouses and active duty, we're a very connected community, and I'm sure transition, I don't know about your transition, but it can be very lonely. Entrepreneurship can be lonely, but our organization is not. We are very active in talking and connecting with all of our entrepreneurs, and we want you to reach out. I never have a problem giving out my email. It's jen@patriotbootcamp.org. Our website is just patriotbootcamp.org, but don't sit on it, but don't be afraid to also get it out there, because it's really all about implementing and executing versus the idea itself.
I'm going to give you the last word here. I've really enjoyed our conversation about Patriot Bootcamp and kind of listening to you talk about your journey through entrepreneurship, the difference of entrepreneurial mindset versus a CEO, and then also pivoting Patriot Bootcamp in the midst of COVID. We've talked about a lot of different issues, a lot of different topics, but is there maybe one thing we didn't get to touch on today that you would like to leave our audience with? I'll give you the last word.
Thank you. I think your last question was great. What about the person who's listening to your show who has an idea or even wants to explore entrepreneurship? Please reach out. That's definitely the first and very important message. The second one is the team. I wouldn't even be here talking to you if it wasn't for a team. If you already started your business or your startup, start quickly with hiring somebody. And that's a whole nother show on how to make that work on very small dollars. I did it. But your team is everything. And that is so important to start early and learn how you do that. A little hint is 1099s, can really get you started. And there's people right now who will work for a fair wage, but probably less than you think you have to pay. Let them work on their hours, their time, remote, and you can come up with a nice deal. So really believe in teams. I think it's, as entrepreneurs, we can't do everything. We don't know everything. So you need to start hiring and attend our Lunch and Learns. Instant Teams is actually coming up soon to teach everyone how to do that. So we would love to have you and join us anytime. But thank you so much. I could talk all afternoon, so this is super fun. It's my speech therapist coming out. I always said I got paid to talk.
Hey, well, that's what we like to do here. So we appreciate you coming on and telling us your story, and tell your sidekick Zoe there that appreciated hearing some of her insights as well. Jennifer Pilcher is the CEO of Patriot Bootcamp, as well as a military spouse. Jennifer, thank you for being on the show with us today.
Great. Thanks so much, Dan.
Absolutely. On behalf of Chairman George P. Bush and the Texas Veterans Land Board, my name is Dan Hamilton, and we will see you back here next Monday.
Follow us on Instagram at Voices of Vets, on Twitter at Voice of Veterans, and on Facebook at facebook.com/Voices of Veterans. To hear more, please visit voicesofveterans.org. Join us in sharing the success stories of Texas veterans. Thank you for joining us for the Next Gen Warrior podcast.